Mr. Pitts.
Hey Todd, how you doing, mate?
I'm
Good to
great.
see
How
you.
are you? Thank you so much.
Yeah, pretty fine, of course, man. Yeah,
Yeah, good
excited to be
morning.
talking to you again. I know we're on the same time zone this time. Last
Yeah,
time I was halfway across the earth.
yeah, this is better. So you're in Los Angeles.
Yes, I think it's funny because last time we were chatting, I think it was like less than a week from me moving back to the United States. So I
Okay.
think from memory, it was like March of 2021. Yeah, so we're a bit,
Wow.
about a year and a half kind of away from then.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's chilling. Both been doing
October.
different things, of course.
Happy
Yeah,
October.
it's kind of wild to think like how quickly the year goes by, but that's just like a byproduct of like getting older and then just life moving faster, right?
Life does feel like it's moving faster as you get older.
And then I think you just become even more conscious of just like what you want to do within that time, right? And
Right.
then and then you just I don't know, it's like then there's a whole sort of part of society that like youthfulness is like where you're going to like do your best years, so to speak, and then skating is such a youthful activity that we get worried that like every year like our bodies change and like are we going to still be able to like skate the same. And I don't know, I just feel like it's way more like on my mind these days than it used to be.
Like the limit, the time limit.
I mean, kind of, it's just interesting just knowing that just I know my body's not the same as it was like like even 5 years ago.
Right.
Like
How
it
old are
still
you now?
feels 35.
Yeah.
So it still feels great, but I just know it's not quite the same. And I just have to do a bit more preparation and, like I'm just more conscious of things, of what to try, what to avoid. And, like I know I could be in a far worse situation. So still happy where I am, but it's just always like something to be conscious of.
Definitely.
I
Yeah.
figure like you must be the same.
Yeah, it definitely you definitely get a little bit more cautious.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you worry a little bit about your aging flesh.
Yeah.
It's
I
temporary.
think also I would even think like just changes in lifestyle and like you have a family, and you have two kids and you have a wife, and I guess your like health plays upon like how then that impacts their lives, right? And
Totally.
I remember I don't know how long this has been a thing, but I know it's been obviously more than perhaps a couple of years. But like you and Joey like both now wear helmets, for instance.
Yeah.
And like I know even for myself, like within the past 2 years, like I've started wearing more pads, and it's changed my relationship to like confidence and like how also been really grateful just to have them, like when I fall in certain ways, and I haven't really had as many just like even superficial like cuts and scrapes, as even though I try to avoid that. But yeah, I kind of think about in your situation that I'm sure all of those factors like play into how it affects your rollerblading, your choices.
Definitely. Yeah, there's more weight that you carry into skating. Like there's more
Yeah,
concern which
for sure.
can which can mess with your enjoyment of skating a little bit.
Yeah,
Just feeling that, you are responsible for other humans and you can't just like throw yourself and be careless. Like there's more at stake.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I suppose that changes like the focus of what you want to get out of skating too. And it probably is quite different like if the point in which you started skating and what your relation what sort of like your lifestyle is when you start skating. Like you're similarly with me, is that like you started when you're young, and then
Yeah.
you went through your teenage years, and then you also went through your early 20s and all these sort of peak athletic periods, and then you've now entered adulthood, and you're full on adult rollerblader at this point. And I think like
Yeah.
if you like your goals are quite different because you've skated for so long and you've explored skating in so many different ways of like throughout the ages of different styles, and also different limits of your body and what you want to push it to. Like if someone who loves a good gap
Yeah.
I know that. And I'm sure you're like far less, considerate to try that now, probably because you've done enough of that in the past. But it's also like, you probably also think, is that even worth it? Like, what if I hurt myself, and like, how does that impact my family? Perhaps,
Right.
I'm sure you have more of these like thoughts now than like you did when you were like 20.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, I definitely miss that the carefreeness of being 20
Yeah.
and just being able to like throw yourself and
Mhm.
um having less at stake.
Yes. Yeah.
Um
It's
it
kind of an
feels
invincibility sort of thing that you just sort of enter, particularly if you've like excelled at something really good and you're like honing your skill and you're getting really confident in it.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I'm extremely grateful to be at this age and still be able just to put skates on. I
That's
always
awesome.
just really try to focus on the basic enjoyment of just being able to put on skates and roll, like, and
Yeah.
be grateful for that, because it's very easy to get down on yourself, or I mean, get overly critical and worry about like certain skills slipping, or oh, I can't do things the way I used to. So I think it's really important just to be grateful for the bare minimum, and then
Yes.
start from there. Start from that very simple place, and then expand on it.
Do you think so? Like what you just said, like sort of reminds me of like actually how I approach just every time I go to skate. It almost goes in sort of stages, and maybe it's similarly to you. Is that like the first and foremost, like with rollerblading, I just love the basic activity of skates on your feet and rolling, just like you said.
Yeah.
But now, like and for the past, probably say at this point, close to 10 years, this has sort of been the way I go about starting skating. Each day I go out will be that like I put on like I sort of like loosen up my body, then I'll put on my skates and I'll just skate around. Like if it's at a skate park or even a street spot, I'll just go off and I'll just skate around and I'll just feel the groove of skating and jump backwards and probably do that for about 15 minutes or something.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then I'll probably stretch, for 10 minutes or whatever it is. And then usually like whether it's sometimes with my skates on, with my skates off, and either way, then I jump back in and then I slowly build up. Like I pretty much don't try to do any grinds or anything in that first period or jumps or anything to really exert my body.
Yeah.
Then it sort of becomes like this layered thing that eventually my body's loose and warmed up that I can start to sort of play with things. Whereas
Right.
like, yeah, like, I don't know, do you have that kind of thing for yourself?
Well, if I have time, that's a really smart approach.
True. Yeah.
That's a really smart approach, is to start with just rolling around, not pushing yourself too hard, and slowly like get to a point where you're really comfortable and doing tricks feels more natural.
Mm.
Usually with my sessions these days are like a very limited time constraint. So maybe I'll have a half hour to 40 minutes to skate.
Yeah.
So there isn't really time to ease into it. So
That's
it's
fair.
usually like pretty much
You take the express lane.
start filming things about
Yeah.
5 minutes into the session, which
Okay.
is
Yeah.
not ideal.
Right.
The way you're describing it is, I think, obviously more realistic and the ideal for warming up your body. Um, but in my case, me and Joey, there's like a rush involved. You,
Sure.
there's such limited time, and
Mhm.
like we want to film a whole bunch, so we usually
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll start filming like 5 minutes in, which can be actually good to kind of just force yourself to just jump in the deep end like right away.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and obviously we're not hucking ourselves. We're not doing super crazy things. That
Yeah.
would be really stupid.
Sure.
Um, but usually we're starting to film before we're really comfortable.
I actually like obviously haven't been in the presence of witnessing how you film, but just from the both of you describing it, um, it's really like the way that you film because you're very playful and back and forth kind of with it.
Yeah,
It's less a very sort of like structured kind of thing of like, all right, now I'm going to film, and it's kind of almost a bit sort of like director talent action kind of thing.
right,
Like I
right.
feel like it seems like maybe it's born out of the sort of necessity of how you have a limited amount of time or whatever, that you sort of like are. I feel like you've also described in the past like about how you'll only take a certain amount of tries, and if it's like taken too long, you just move on to something else, and like even considering that is an interesting thing too.
Yeah. Um, I think there's definitely something about just filming a lot
Mm.
as a like I think people can get too hung up on like I need to do something really good,
Yeah.
right? It needs to be like film worthy, you know, that
Sure. Yeah,
that expression.
that's yep.
We don't really have that. We'll just film like anything. Just just do like a whole bunch of stuff, and I think magic can come out of that. Like in any discipline,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's artwork or skating or music, uh, just getting in the habit of just doing a lot of shit
Yes.
and not being so precious with it,
Mhm.
like not thinking this needs to be perfect, this needs to be awesome. Just do it.
I think like and you're describing, other artistic disciplines that have this approach too. I was just thinking like I've long thought this. I sometimes wish like I just could have someone um film me almost like perhaps just for a day, because like I find sometimes the best skating that I do, or that it's not even in regards to like, let's say how you want to describe the level of tricks or how that amount of satisfaction. It comes from more of the personal satisfaction of how it feels. Is like usually when I'm skating and I'm not conscious of it being filmed and I'm just getting into the vibe of whatever that moment is. It's usually where it's the most fun. Like I described to you about like with the Boshy Pope skate off just recently, the most fun that I've had, and I've had it in similar sort of skating event situations, is like at some period where it might be just like a session is going on and you're vibing with like a number of people, and you're not worried about like there's a filmer filming you or executing a specific trick. The trick might just be like something you've just thought of before and you play with it and you might move throughout like the space or whatever it is. But I would love to have more of that, almost like documentary, like a fly on the wall kind of like observer,
Yeah,
like documenting the, because I feel like that's when you also look the best, because you're less self-conscious and you're just
right.
like moving. And that's what I was saying, like, I wish like there was someone who just filmed some more of that stuff at that like event, because like I was really having a good time like later in the day when I had a really good skate with a bunch of people.
Yeah,
And yeah, I just think I know I'm not the only person who must feel this way. That like even when we're going to film a trick, of being like, oh yeah, I want to record this, that we try to like um get outside of the mindset of knowing that this is a documented recorded thing, and how to make
definitely.
it authentic and natural. But it's very difficult.
Totally. No, I totally hear what you're saying. It's almost like as soon as the camera comes on, you lose something. You lose like a certain spontaneity, a certain freedom. Um, like when you're just vibing and you're not thinking about the fact that you're being filmed, oftentimes
Yeah.
that's when the best things happen. So
Yep.
I hear you. Like if you could just have someone just filming you all the time.
I also think like so in more recent years, and even just the past couple of months, I've noticed this. Like I'd gone out skating, a number of times, like with friends. It might be, just at a skate park. It could also be a street session. But sometimes there's always this idea of like you feel like you probably should get something filmed. Like maybe even if it's just like using an iPhone and you're wanting to publish it like on social media, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's even like I've just noticed a bunch of times I'm like, oh yeah, I'd like to get a trick, but I get so caught up with just sort of having fun and enjoying the experience that like I don't. There's a hindsight, like afterwards, after the fact, where I'm like, probably should have stopped and recorded this or recorded that. Um, but then it's also like, it doesn't matter. Like I had such a good time. but it's this sort of trade-off where it's like there is an element you still need to be a bit more conscious of, like taking that initiative, like, okay, no, like I should do this and I should step in to like get that done. But like, I don't know, it's almost like when those sessions happen where I forget to like ask someone's like, hey, can you record this or whatever, it ends up feeling more kind of like how it used to be when I was younger, first entering skating, when they're absolutely the same as you, no phones, barely anyone had a video camera, and that you just skated for the sake of it. And if there was anything that went down, it might have been more of like passed through word of mouth or something.
Right.
I feel like that's a totally different age. And I think
Yeah.
about that with how, you know, the youth are coming through the world, not only just in the skating cultures, but like just how so much is like is about the documentation, or like the kind of the it's almost like just a simulated experience. Everything is about the how it's going to appear through the
Right.
recorded image, rather than
Right.
just like what is it just to like experience, you know, something in the world without, you know, having your camera documenting it. Yeah,
Definitely. It can almost like,
doesn't.
yeah, it totally alters the experience. It can mess with the experience of life and the experience of skating when you're overly focused on documenting it.
Yes,
And that's coming from someone who loves to document, the
yeah,
skating.
totally. There's a great I guess it's a piece of writing, perhaps an essay, which is written by Susan Sontag. I think it's called In Plato's Cave. I read it when I was in university. My photography teacher had us all read it, and it always stuck with me. I highly recommend anyone like looking it up and reading it if they're interested. But essentially, it was sort of just talking about what we're discussing, about this whole idea of like experiences becoming, or how the photographic medium became this thing where people were really about um, documenting things without experiencing it. That like you would go places and you would go there just to photograph it. Like you'd go to Niagara Falls as opposed to like be there to witness it with your eyes, but to then take the image to then record it for sharing it with other people, for instance, like when you returned home or whatever. And then it's like you really just then start experiencing life through a lens as opposed to like through, you know, the lens of your eyes, right? And it
Right.
does change and shape your experience. And I feel like it's even more relevant now, like this piece of writing, as we get further and further like into a realm that's like so saturated by visual imagery, and that the recorded media is like so much about like how we experience life, for better or for worse. But yeah, anyone, I highly recommend reading it if you're fascinated by that kind of
That's
like
interesting. Yeah.
critical thinking. Yeah, yeah,
And it's interesting that we're discussing this while we're recording ourselves
yes,
discuss it. Um,
yeah, absolutely.
but back to your original point, it would be interesting if everything was just recorded automatically and it was something that you could just forget about in the
Yeah,
experience. Like there wasn't like a level of like press record. Okay, now we're recording. Like
yeah.
bring out the camera. Now it's being recorded. It's almost like if everything was just automatically being recorded, you could almost just forget about it and not be conscious of
I
it and
mean,
just live the experience and enjoy it.
there's so many layers to that, like just in the human experience, though, isn't it? Like, you know, how we interact when we're talking to someone. Let's say, like, obviously there's experience of through a device like this. There's you know, actual like physical person to person like communication. There's if you write, like there's so many variations of how you can communicate with people, yet how you come across can be totally different in each one of those, and how like some might, you might find yourself way more comfortable in that than the other. um it's I don't know, it sometimes I almost feel that like I don't know how, like I just sometimes wonder about like authenticity in anything in life. Then when we're like consciously always making decisions, you know, even if they are like immediate and whatnot. But just like um there was a thing I remember my sister telling me about, like, she was studying philosophy, and there was this idea of that, like, there is no true selfless act or something. Like everything everything always usually has some means to why, like, you choose to do this or do that. And maybe like some of the only other people might have thought of this way more, but like maybe say an example that I think her and my dad thought of at the time were that, like, someone's saving a child's life in danger, that it's an immediate response. You're not thinking about the how that impacts you. It's just like a sense of like a kind of like a survival mode kind of thing, obviously for someone
Yeah.
else, but like you jump in and that, like, yeah, it's, I don't know, I think about that sometimes, of just how much like you're different in so many different scenarios with the different relationships you have with different people, and that like someone's idea of who you are is different to how you feel when you're just like at home by yourself, or with your partner, or with your coworkers. I don't know, there's never just like one sort of thing. We're all made up of all these different things, and it's like uh yeah, I just
Definitely.
sometimes never feel like, well, what is actually authentic?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I gave up on the idea of like being yourself is kind of a silly concept because, like you said, you are so many different people depending
Yes.
on the situation, depending on who you're surrounded with, who, what kind of, you know, situation it is.
Mhm.
There is no yourself. It's not like you can just be yourself in any situation. Like you
Yeah.
are a million different things
Mhm.
all at once. You have a
Yeah.
dark side, you have a joyful side, you have the skating Robbie, you have the Robbie that's just at home with nobody around, you have the Robbie, like there's a million different Robbies,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
Um
I
so
think, yeah, sorry, continue.
no. um like what does Robbie's life look like outside of skating?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something to think about in relation to identity. And I feel like a lot of rollerbladers probably have moments of this, but we are multifaceted people. Outside of rollerblading, I mean, I I have a lot of other interests, a lot of other like artistic pursuits that have like taken more interest in different points and periods of my life. Whether that's through design, whether that's through video and film, whether that's through fashion, um, or even like cooking for myself, or cooking for other people and throwing a dinner party. But like, I don't know, there's a lot of variations. Like, I think kind of at the core of it, like outside of everything, hope I just only, I suppose, really try to be the best version of myself as I can, and how that then impacts other people, of just trying to be a good person, and therefore like a good friend, or a good family member, or a good, representative um, for rollerblading, or a good representative for expression in life, or something. Um, but I think, yeah, like I don't know. It's interesting thinking about when you get to a stage where your life becomes sort of you end up on a bit of a public platform, and you sort
Right.
of have to sort of your choice of how you assume that role or not. And yeah, I do think that there is an element of like, I wonder, like, oh, I'm intrigued of how people like perceive me, and how people interact with me, and what they think of me. And it's always never a total picture of obviously like who I am.
Right.
And I feel like all my closer friends like know me far more because of that, as you do when you get to experience someone more
Yeah.
deeply. But like, the one thing that I say is that, like, I never like disregard or think less of any sort of variation of like different levels of interaction or friendships, because I do think that like everything has like an element of context, and sometimes that they all have their sort of significance and levels of, you can appreciate them for what they bring to your life. Could be
Right.
someone that you barely have, it might be circumstantial friendship. So it could be someone that you just work with, and that may have, could be just from like a certain amount of hours during the day that you spend with them, and then outside of the context of work, you don't really see them. But whatever you get during that time actually might be really valuable, and it might really invigorate your like daily experience.
Definitely.
Perhaps if you met them like at the football game, or in the supermarket, you might just be like, hey, what's up, like, but you probably don't share anything far greater than that, but that's like okay. And then
Right.
there's other people that like maybe you don't see them that often, but you have such a close intimate connection with them, and you might consider them one of your closest dear friends, but you only see them like, I don't know, once a few years or something. But every time you
Right.
see them, it almost feels like you just catch up where you're left off, and that it's non-circumstantial sort of connection, and there's sort of something deeper that you can sort of like connect with. Um, I do think there's something amazing about rollerblading, and I was just talking about it with my housemate, um, about how we can sort of travel throughout the world, and probably connect with people in whatever city and country we sort of end up in. And there's sort of an amazing thing about how very open rollerbladers are to welcoming one another, even if you don't know too much about one another. It's just almost some down to that unspoken bond of just that you do this other thing that you both appreciate. And then also for the longest time, it has been a very, sort of subcultural thing that there's this care and nurturing you want to extend to each other. And so I don't know, it's kind of like a special thing in that way. So I don't know. I think, to get like, I suppose, back to the beginning of it, there's like so many variations of like who we are. But I'm always just grateful to try to be the best person I can in any one of those like scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were recently in New York
Yeah. Yeah.
for the Boshi Pope. How long were you there?
I think I was there total. It might have been like just 5 days. I think it was 5 or 6
Yeah.
days. It was so great. I hadn't
Did
been
you stay
there.
with someone?
Yeah, I stayed with John Jenkins.
Okay.
Um, if I know you're friends with John, you've spent some
Triple
time in
X.
Arizona with him. Yes, with X. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John, man, I like
If
John a
if
lot. It's been years.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's a great guy. He's a great
Yeah.
guy. We became really good friends over the past few years, and yeah, he's a dear friend. He's actually coming out to LA and staying with me next week. So yeah, it's gonna be
Nice.
good. But yeah, I stayed with him, and it was awesome. I mean, there's something about New York City that's just so electric, and every time I go there, I just feel this energy that like I almost always want to move there every time I go there, which is,
Yeah.
you never know, it could be a possibility. Something I do sometimes entertain, but um I think also just like, obviously outside of rollerblading, but rollerblading in that city is definitely unlike any other experience. It feels kind of almost so true to the roots of skating. Like when I think of like the origins of rollerblading, I almost think of two sort of imagery. I think of um beachside beachside, like Southern Californian, Venice Beach, that kind of like style of skating, sun drenched, everyone happy, having a good time,
Yeah.
soaking in the rays. And then the complete opposite of you know true street skating of New York, being like engulfed by buildings and grit and concrete and fast motion and cars and pedestrians and traffic, and like they're kind of, I feel like, both of the sort of core imagery I think of like of skating that I think about from the origins. I've never really been like one that's gravitated towards like the beach, and I think it's perhaps because of where I just grew up. But like city urban environments have always been the one that I've like loved. And when I first started skating, I lived in a remote part of Australia that was like tropical, and it was a small town. There was nothing like, the closest thing to something like New York would be Melbourne, which I eventually like moved to. But like I always longed for like that lifestyle and that kind of at least in skating, just like I admired that environment. So every time I go there, I just get so hyped, and everyone there always is so friendly, and yeah, it's a beautiful place. Have you spent any time there?
Never been to New York, no.
I would love to see you there. I'm
Yeah.
sure you'd have a, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I could see a whole like wizard trip,
Oh
you know,
man,
like
that'd be so
that'd
much
be
fun.
great, you know,
Yeah.
like Mike Torres being there, obviously, like, I mean, I know Leon's been there a number of times, so
Yep.
like, who knows? I feel like it'd be a great thing for you and Joey to like to go there.
Definitely.
Because it's
Well,
kind of similar, you know, like,
yeah.
I mean, Vancouver is a very like big city, and particularly downtown Vancouver has like a city feel.
Yeah.
And you can see that in your older videos when you've like skated in session there. Like definitely a different skating environment than like when you're skating at home in Kamloops. So I would imagine like it's sort of there has probably like something shared in that how what you've grown up skating kind of similar to when I first started when I lived in Palmerston, you know. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I
love the
think our
energy
definitely
of skating in a big city.
yeah.
It's just exciting
Actually,
and
you were in Vancouver not too long ago. I mean, it was like early in the year, wasn't it? You
yeah,
filmed that thing, Nanny?
yeah, in the spring. I was there for a
Yeah,
couple
that was
days.
sick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Had such a good
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I almost
Yeah.
feel like I'm sure you wish you could go there more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so much fun. There's so much to skate and
Mm. All
obviously
right.
the
So,
people.
question for
Yeah.
you is because someone just recently asked me about this as well. Actually, it was Chase Rushing.
Yeah.
He asked me what like if I have a favorite skate spot kind of thing or place to skate, and I was
Uh
saying for me like downtown LA is one of my favorites because it's the closest to that sort of like city environment where you can just like pull up and get out of the car and leave your car and just skate around and find things. But like I was going to ask, like, do you enjoy sort of less destination skating and sort of just like being left to roam and finding things in an environment as opposed to like knowing you want to skate something? Like what's that kind of variation of your choice when you know you're wanting to have a street skate obviously outside of a skate park?
yeah. Yeah, I love being able to just focus at one place
Mm.
and like extract all the possibilities out of one place.
Yep.
As opposed to being rushed and trying to hit like a whole bunch of things.
Sure.
It's nice to just
What do you
focus
think
on one
about
place.
what do you think you enjoy most about that? Like why do you think like that approach works like better for you as opposed to like others in that way?
I think I just the best the most enjoyable sessions for me are when I can just really, like I said, extract all the possibilities from a place, just really focus on something pretty simple,
Mm.
and move my body in just many different ways on a simple object.
Yep.
Um, and that can sometimes, like, even just flat ground, even just the most simple of spots can be the most
Yeah.
enjoyable because I'm not constrained by an object by trying to like master an object. It's more just freedom and possibilities. So the most enjoyable sessions I've ever had have been like on a little curb or like
Mm.
something simple, because the more simple an object is, the more variety there is in terms of body movement that you
Yep.
can do on it. And it's not pre-composed. Like if you have like a rail or like a launch, there's like certain moves that you're kind of called to on that object.
Yep.
And you can stray from it a little bit, but there's constraints. Like you have to jump a certain height, you have to
Mm-hmm.
slide a certain distance. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I just love it when
Almost like
you,
a ride, isn't it?
yeah, it is like a ride, and there's a
Mm.
path that you go on the ride.
Yeah.
Um, there's a certain admission that you have to pay, whereas
Yeah.
the you can be your own ride. It's almost like the difference between a treadmill and
Mm.
no piece of equipment at all. So like on a treadmill, you have to walk the speed that the treadmill is taking you.
Yep.
If you go on just no equipment, you can do jumping jacks, you can do body squats, you can do high knees. Like it's infinite how you can move your body in that simple space as opposed to a piece of equipment.
Also, if you're just taking the running, you're actually like moving distance to
Right.
you know like you could end up in a completely different environment, for instance, like
Right.
if you're willing to run the distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could run in a circle and not actually go anywhere, or, so yeah, I think, yeah, I like simplicity. Obviously, I like, exploring different objects in skating.
It feels
Um,
very like, if I think about, the last number of videos that like you and Joey have made, it seems very much like that. They're almost like the idea of like focusing on a spot, like it comes down to probably a couple of things of like all you've just described, but also probably some time constraints. And I can see how like using something almost very minimal in its structures then becomes less about it as the obstacle, but more about like how you can play with it and you can do whilst using this space. Like I think about like how you both use just some of those curbs that you frequently skate, or even those rounded sort of parking blocks, or just like
yeah,
um there are these static things, but then you're able to move and create your own forms within that space. Whereas like, yeah, I suppose like as I was saying, like doing a handrail, it's very fun and exhilarating, but it is kind of like what you then apply to the handrail. As there's X amount of like possibilities of like pre-described tricks.
right.
Obviously, the variation, like you said, outside of it, but it is very much like a confined sort of experience,
Yeah,
and that's why it's always sort of felt like I love skating handrails. I haven't done it in a while, but I've grew up doing it, so I do enjoy that thrill of doing it and the satisfaction. But it is
yeah,
a very linear kind of process too, and it also doesn't involve a lot of skating, which
right.
is the interesting thing when you think about it, of how like rollerblading got very focused on grinding. That like um the handrail is almost like the quintessential thing that removes any real aspect of like what the true essence of rollerblading actually is.
Right.
You're really getting very far away from it, and it's like that's why sometimes like when I think about certain eras, maybe like the early 2000s or mid 2000s, like of certain styles, that like skating felt a very much like a wheeled version of soap shoes.
Yeah.
um, for better or for worse, because I still appreciated the technicality and the amazing skill of like watching someone do. Also, because when you started skating like you, people only were like doing variations that when you saw someone do a true spin, it was like, wow, that was felt revolutionary. And
Yeah.
then eventually by 2005, you're seeing people spinning 360 true spin into a topside variation, and then maybe even switching up in the middle and then 360ing out.
Yeah.
So there was also this element where that was blowing your mind because you knew how far it had come.
Yeah.
But when you're thinking of it critically, like obviously later, there was one of those things I thought about. It's like, yeah, it's actually like very removed from the rolling aspect of skating itself, which was what you think is actually the core of what we do. And it's been really fascinating to see the rolling aspect be so much more embraced and just a part of like the regular landscape again, because it
Yeah.
was so vacant for so long.
Oh my
And I
God.
think
Yeah.
that's why someone like Dominic Sagona was like amazing to watch, or Brandon Smith, because like they were so focused on lines, you know.
Right.
And John Jenkins like loves he's told me the story how like when he was filming Dominic for the M1 video, like Dominic would start from like the other side of a parking lot and just stride, and just like he'd build up this energy and this feeling, and then he'd go into a big top talk salt on like a big ledge or something.
Right.
But for him, it's like everything from the moment he started back there is a part of the whole motion. And even so like that's where I feel like people like, as I said, Dominic and Brandon, like their their skating stood out so much because like you would see so much more of their skating in between the actual technical aspects of the tricks itself. And I
Yeah.
always feel like the skating itself really speaks to one's style of how you move on your skates outside of the um because again, it's mostly about these posed positions. And
Right.
even within that, there's variation of style, which is fascinating to look at how everyone can do a soul grind. It could be there's so many variations of like certain people's are going to look totally different. That's incredible. But I still think like the way that you move on your skates really speaks to like your own expression. I think,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that you and Joey appreciate that too, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Because I mean, you both even play into it as well, you know, sometimes where it's just more natural and authentic. Sometimes you're both like comedic where you'll do it as almost like this comedic gesture, as like it's almost like just like you're having fun whilst doing it too, but you're like doing it to the extreme to kind of like I don't know, even make jokes of it, but also like make some commentary. I don't know, but at the same time, because you can't help but laugh perhaps by doing it, so it's fun.
Right.
um and isn't fun really just at the core of rollerblading, like I think there's that element of like why can't fun be taken seriously?
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best moments or the best sections are when you can really feel that the person is having a lot of fun and it's contagious.
Yeah,
That can be the most enjoyable to watch. So
I
for
think the
you,
one. Yeah, go.
is skating always fun for you, or do you have moments where it's not fun?
In more recent years, it's generally been more fun. But I always try to be honest, particularly when just talking publicly, that like I don't think skating is always um a fun experience. It definitely can be a variation of an emotional experience. And particularly, I think when you get to the point of like if you're wanting to film things and how you want to push that, yeah, there's 100% been moments where it hasn't been fun. Um, but like any sort of like task you undertake or a conquest or whatever, like sometimes like the just because it's not fun doesn't mean that it's not fulfilling or
Right.
satisfying. So there's a variation, because sometimes you do have to endure some elements of hardship and pain in order to feel satisfaction and fulfillment, or even enjoyment, as opposed to
Right.
having fun. Enjoyment and fun can be tied, but not always. And I think that's a thing. Like I've always still had enjoyment, even in the times where something has been frustrating
Right.
to accomplish. Um, I also find like the way I've moved in skating to the more like recent years, like right now, is that like I do think the way I choose to skate is almost a bit of a reflection of that, because like I feel like I've done enough certain things where I don't like to get tied up in the specifics of things, and I'm almost more trying to have an expressionistic experience, as opposed to like these specific go from here to here, or these grind movements or whatever, like and I'm not doing it a certain way. Like sometimes it gets too bogged down in that, but I'm already sort of happy with like I guess the exploration I've done in that, or even the cataloging of it in video parts. But like skating now, I'm more like I that's why I was saying like how if you were just to like film me as opposed to like, all right, we're recording now, it just like I feel like those are the times where I actually do feel like kind of more fun, where I'm like bopping around here and like just throwing a little frontside or something, and then like doing like a 540 like pivot on the ground and a little sesslidey thing there, like because I'm catching all the like the moments, and that all that like that actually generally does feel kind of fun. The really interesting thing like I thought about this kind of like recently is that like a lot of skating requires a lot of focus, and a lot of like conventional skating that we've both grown up in the aggressive skating world requires a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And when you sort of look at skaters when they're doing that, a lot of times people's focus is so like, and you could think like, oh, they actually kind of look angry or whatnot. And I don't necessarily think that that's like a true um like their facial expressions is not like a true indicator of actually like their emotion. I just think it's a byproduct of their focus. So the fascinating thing is when you see someone accomplish something and come out of it, and they're like, and then they catch the camera and they're like, and then they break that moment, that the focus becomes so linear to like the thing that like everything else becomes, blurred, and it just becomes about that one task. And then all of a sudden you've done it, and then you're free to like break from it. And then that's what sometimes where I feel like I wish more people like I see it more now, but like filming to those moments when you see someone break out and they smile, because it's like, no, that they, it might have looked like very serious and whatnot during the time of whatever they're doing the trick is, but like they're still feeling a sense of enjoyment from it. And usually that breaking of the, the expression of the smile shows it like, oh yeah, that is still fun. I don't think you
Yeah.
have to skate around with a smile to still have fun. And that's why I'm always fascinated by how, like when, because I feel like I'm usually quite focused sometimes in the face when I doing certain stuff, and but still people will say to me like, oh, your skating is so fun. And so sometimes when I've like filmed a section or something, like not everything in it, as I said, it hasn't been fun, like not a lot of smiles in the tricks, but like the it's always very enjoyable and a fulfilling experience. So I'm always fascinated like what people see in what I do as being fun. Like I'm just happy that like people are inspired in a joyful way to be like, oh, that's fun. I want to try something, like I'm inspired from that. So yeah, I've thought about that kind of a lot.
Right. And there's definitely deeper levels of enjoyment, I think, than fun. Like like feeling really confident and feeling really free and feeling
Mm.
motivated. I think those things are a lot more important than fun. Um, because like you said, something can be hard and something can be difficult, and but like if it means a lot to you, I guess meaning, I think, is more important than fun.
Mm.
When you feel that intrinsic sense of like this means something to me, or I think something that can ruin the experience of skating for me is being overly self-critical. And when I get in that headspace of like, oh, I'm no good, I'm not as good as this guy, you start comparing yourself, oh, I can't do that trick like that guy. Do you ever experience that when you're skating, like being self-critical?
I used to be way more, but I think that's just like how I was as a person. Um, I yeah, I think just I think I was always comparing myself to other people and never feeling equal or never feeling
Yeah,
valid. That everyone else was always the example I wished to attain to be like or whatnot. And
yeah,
obviously, as I grew to be an adult and explored myself through my expression, um, there's just some sort of like I don't think you can call it like it was just a moment, but eventually I sort of have I could look back and be like, oh, I've come a long way. And it's to do with the sense of confidence that like, no, like what I'm choosing to do feels just what I want to do. And I kind of think when I relinquished that like comparative way of thinking or expectation or anything, that was where I felt like the most free and the most confident in my skating, because it just then became about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to feel, and not having to endure feelings that felt like it was forced because of other people's expectation or how I would think that they might think of me. It's like one of the best things for me is just wearing clothes and dressing up. Like I love it. It's so I just find it so fun, particularly when I put together an outfit that like feels great, like, and it could be very varying, but like I love just like going out into the world, and there is that element of confidence that I do it with, like it doesn't matter what like someone else thinks or if they're going to stare or whatnot. I'd kind of like grown to the point where I learned just to sort of like be kind of um put everything else in the peripheral, and then you're just sort of like doing your thing and going about the world. And I think like with that way of like way of thinking, it sort of helped me become more just confident kind of like in everything. I don't know, I think like I do think that that's the hardest thing of like comparative thinking definitely can hold a lot of people back. um but I do think like I think you also do have to like try and fail and just push yourself beyond what is comfortable, and being a bit vulnerable with yourself, and then also be vulnerable in your existing in spaces with other people, could be other people in rollerblading. I remember that one of the first times, when I was like 18, I think it was, like, and I was wearing like skin tight jeans, in 2005, and most of my rollerblading friends didn't. And most of my rollerblading friends knew me for wearing baggy pants.
Yeah.
Making that choice, it felt very uncomfortable. Not for me, like I felt like this is what I wanted to do, but there's an element because I wasn't familiar with it that it's kind of uncomfortable. And then you're doing that in a space where people aren't used to you, and they're also like a bunch of young boys. You have to take that chance and learn to accept whatever sort of comes with you, and not be dissuaded to be like, if you don't try it, you don't really have any kind of um like variation of like perspective.
Right.
You're only thinking of it one way. And I think like unless you try something, you won't be able to like reinforce what you actually do like. You won't be able to like potentially expand what your ideas of yourself could be, or what you enjoy, or and I think maybe we had a touch on it in the sense of we were saying how like this idea of being yourself. I've thought about it a lot in the past like year or so, and this idea of people being like, it's like kind of like a disparaging remark of being like, oh, they should just be themselves. Like, like quit doing that. Just be yourself. Or people, or even positively, oh, you need to just be yourself. Because I don't think there is any real sense of what self is. I think, we're constantly, I think if you're open to it, you're constantly an evolving thing, an evolving being. And I don't think anything is like, oh, that's your true self. You might find something that you feel very comfortable and it feels very expressive of who you are and who you want to be. And you may end up staying like that. And that's great. But I do think it's more nuanced than that. And I think like I'm always most open to like just seeing what's more possible in variations of myself, of anything in life. Because I've tried stuff in recent years that sort of feel I've been intrigued by, or curiosity. And I feel like if I didn't give it a shot, I have no sort of frame of reference. It's like, oh, is for me? You're only left in this situation of wonder, and that doesn't do anything for you. Like you end up this, what was it? It was like it was like Matthew McConaughey or something. There was a quote I remember like hearing him say is like, if you give something your all, you at least know what the two outcomes are. Like if you gave something your all and it didn't quite go through, you gave it your all. But
Right.
if you're going to give yourself halfway of trying something, you end up like always knowing you could have tried more. So I feel like if you never just take that step of like being vulnerable to try something, you don't know. It's only just like it's all hypothetical and what you think it could be. And most often, I
Right.
think with most things in life, things are never quite what you think they are when you do them anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So true. I'm a strong believer in experimentation. I think you need to be your own scientist and experiment with things.
Yes.
Try
And I
something
think
on.
also that just I also think that doesn't need to be that you have to do something that challenges like a status quo or like convention.
Right.
Like you like to be to be to explore and be expressive, or experimental. What I mean, like you don't have to do something that's weird
No.
or that's going to shock someone. Like you don't have to dress like as outrageous as I do. That's just the way I've grown to explore and like it. But it could be something that's almost like within. It doesn't have to be something that's like a physical sense of expression.
Right.
You know, yeah. Like it doesn't. I just meaning that it doesn't have to. Sometimes I feel like people think that like to be explorative is like you have to be like weird and eccentric, and I don't think that
Yeah.
that's the case.
Yeah. It
And
doesn't need
and,
to be
and
extreme.
continue with what you're saying because I feel like that touches on that.
Yeah. You can do it in very subtle ways. You know,
Yep.
if you've labeled yourself as shy, you could just go, start a little conversation with the girl at Starbucks. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to be super eccentric or anything.
Yep.
You can just kind of push yourself in subtle ways and kind of challenge your ideas of yourself and what you are. Yeah. I don't like I think it's unhealthy for people to label themselves too much, or as I am this way. I am, um I am, shy, or I am an introvert, I am an
Yeah.
extrovert. It's like, no, you've had some experiences in your life where, that made you feel introverted, but
Mm.
there's an extrovert inside of you. It just would take the right motivation and the right situation to bring that out of you. Any of those, personality labels, I think, you know, just limit people, and it's good to push against it.
Oh, absolutely. Like I love that. That's like so beautifully said. I think that's so
And
true.
I want to say something like there's something really inspiring about you. I think it's that you've you've really gone a long way on your own path, and going back to comparing yourself. I don't think you would have gone on that path if you were comparing yourself a lot, because you would have been trying to keep up with the status quo. And
Yeah.
instead of like trying to win this race, you just went this way.
Yeah.
And that's really inspiring, and it's something that's rare. Not many people do that because they get caught up in keeping up or getting ahead, and they don't recognize that there's another path that they could go down, and they could compete with themselves, and they could try to be the best version of
Yeah.
themselves. They don't need to learn all these other skills, especially in rollerblading, where there really is no goal. We're not trying to win a game, we're not trying to win a fight, we're not trying to defeat someone. So the goals can be really what we can make our own goals,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is obvious, but most people don't embrace that. Um, and it's in any discipline that you take on. Like, you don't need to learn all the skills that other people have. You can generate your own skills and generate your own path, and you'll end up in a place that those people, you know, won't.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I've one of the things I've always like thought about within rollerblading is how um it's also a very like um a widely diverse discipline too. Like, something that speed skating does have, a goal to it, and it's a start and finish, and it's more like quantifiable, and it can be more competitive in its structure and whatnot, right? But like what we've sort of fallen into, in quote unquote aggressive skating, um I've never really connected with the competitive side of it. I've like entertained it and I've like done it, but I've never mostly sort of connected with it kind of spiritually. And I've later, thought of like, if you had to sort of surmise the skating experience in the culture that we're in, is this is generally sort of two frames of mind. As a generalization, there is people who are going to look at it through the competitive lens, and there's people who are going to look at it through the artistic lens. And the competitive lens is they're going to look at it through a hierarchy of like, this trick will equate to this, and from what we know of it, that's like more difficult and that's harder, and it all equates to goal and a system of hierarchy. And that's how like perhaps that style of skating tends to be like works best for competition maybe. But then like the other side with the artistic side is that there are people who are like more concerned with expression and style, and that becomes, it doesn't matter like what, um it's not really like what you can do, it's what you choose to do and what you're saying through your choices. And that, like I said earlier, is that there could be many different ways that someone like does a soul grind, but you might gravitate towards someone else. And it's like you can't say that someone else to do that style of soul grind, because it comes more internally from someone's like built up experience, and you see it from a super early age that mostly a lot of people develop these like moments of expression very early on, and they just develop through confidence over the years of skating. But like everyone has their own unique mark, and often competition doesn't care for that. or by definition, it doesn't allow for it to be to blossom. 'Cause, like, how do you like quantify and you know calculate in a system of a competitive lens of a subjectivity of expression? Like, I just never understood how like there are like painting competitions and stuff. It doesn't really kind of make sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the thing. Like, when I got to a point where I realized, like, oh no, it's really about someone's expression that like I'm drawn to in skating. It's not because they can do this certain stuff. Like, it's a concept I realized it very early on. But all the skaters that I mostly like um were also mostly people who were sort of like on a cult like amateur level of skating. Like, there's something about, like, obviously the people who get to a top of something tend to be the ones that can like combine the two, that have the expression but also have the skill. And that's a
Right.
very sport rollerblading specific kind of thing that it has. But it is one of those things that, like, yeah, I was always mostly gravitated towards people for what they did, and it was less about exactly the what they could do skill wise.
Right.
It's like how they're choosing to do it. Like, what were you kind of like drawn to in terms of, like, were you similarly with people and their choices?
Yeah, I was always drawn to like the T-Bone films. The I was more so than the VG films because I felt like the T-Bone films were like a lot more about the personality of the people. Like, um, it just felt a lot more, you know, expressive, and
Yeah,
I was always drawn to, people that their personality came through in their skating. It
yeah,
didn't really matter what tricks they were doing.
sure.
The things they did, I don't know, you felt like an emotion towards it,
Yep.
you know. Um,
Do you
yeah,
also think, like,
I've always been more interested in like unique styles. Um,
how would you comment on people? Because I feel like, just thinking about it in the sense of very boisterous, loud personalities, like, definitely stand out, and they're charismatic, and they were filled the early generation of rollerblading. But then there are certainly these incredible skaters who, like, had so much influence, but their personality was very mild, and you didn't see a lot of them. And I wonder how you connect. Like, I'm thinking more specifically someone like Dustin Latimer. I've never met Dustin, but just like, he seems like a wonderful person. But he also seems very, like, kind of more quiet, and he didn't seem as like loud in videos, that, but his like choice of what he did, everything in skating came through. And it might even just be a little look to the camera he would make that you sort of saw some glimpse. And it's like, I think it's great when you see the variation of personalities of skating, even to that, where they're not loud, or maybe they're more like subdued or quiet, and that people also need to connect with. There's those type of people who need to see variations of themselves, like that personality too, right? Like, as in, yeah, it's I don't know, like, did you, like, because how did you feel like growing up? Like, were you more drawn to certain people who were more like boisterous? Because you seem like someone who's always been very confident, and you've come across in all of your videos as someone who loves to be performative and to talk and to have fun. And I wonder, is that uh like, where was all that instinct kind of like coming from? Is it just coming from you? Is it like, did you just like to be, like, do you like being the center of attention in that way, in those times of your life? Or is, you know what I mean? Like, where did the instincts of all that sort of like come from? And does that, like, do you think about, with the skaters that influence you, did that influence you in your development as a person, as you were growing up as a teenager into, being an adult?
yeah, that's interesting. In my younger days, I liked to be the center of attention. Um, I was into drama, I liked acting, I liked, performing.
Yeah.
When I was in the eighth grade, which in Canada, eighth grade is like the first year of high school,
Yep. Okay.
and I dressed up like TLC, the band
Oh, yeah,
TLC,
yeah,
and sang
yeah.
Waterfalls
Wow.
in front of the
Beautiful.
whole school,
Yeah.
um, which was extremely like weird and almost like, committing social suicide, was like dressing up like a girl and singing in front of the whole school.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I've always enjoyed, performing and doing that. And I was drawn to like the loudmouth skaters like Brian Smith and
Yep.
like Josh Petty and those big funny personalities. And in my
Sure.
younger days, I definitely was like that. I was definitely very out there and very loud and weird and
Yeah.
um but and I still have that aspect of my personality for sure. There's still
Yeah.
a part of me who I like doing weird things. I like being loud at times,
Mm.
but often I'm a lot more quiet and a lot more introverted.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's so emblematic of what you were just talking about.
right,
Remember, you said that like without these labels that give someone like there's probably a lot of people that labeled you as being an extrovert, but
right.
you also inhabit introverted qualities too.
Yeah.
And maybe as you've gotten older, those have become ones who you've embraced more, perhaps.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed being by myself. Like I love being alone.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't really go out. Like I don't go to parties really. I go to bed early. I'm a
Yeah.
pretty boring person. Uh, Skating is my way of like having adventure
Yeah.
and being like having fun in life is through skating. Like I don't have like a lot of friends. Um, you know,
How has family like changed that for you?
it's been amazing because like I have my clan. I don't really
Mm.
have to go out to be social. I can just,
Yep.
be around my kids and my wife, and like that's enough socializing for me. Obviously, I
Yeah.
have my people at work, like I
Yeah.
love socializing with them. So I definitely get it between work and family. I get enough socializing. I don't feel like I need to like go out on top of that.
Mm.
And then, you know, yeah, I'm content.
That's great. That's a great
Yeah.
like realization to have in one's life, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I'm curious whether like, because I guess you and Joey probably had a bit less of the sort of traveling experiences as maybe other people have, but you've definitely
Yeah.
been to other areas of the world and cities and stuff. And I'm curious how, your like provincialism of where you like, I mean, also like for one, I'm sure Canadian skaters could talk on this like at a greater length, but it's also like you're even within a smaller thing too, like being from Kamloops, like the same thing as like being from St. John's, like
Yeah.
as Danny, Colin, and Stuart and stuff. And but like I kind of wonder, I'm curious to know like how when you went to these other places, like did you connect with other skaters in the same way? Like have you sort of had, do you have any sort of lasting friendships that went from like maybe I know you both went to like Amsterdam, for instance, right? Like you were around that IMYTA. Like did you like meet other skaters during that time? Like or like were you sort of more just observers and you kept to yourself? Like, yeah, curious how like the outside mixing with different skaters has like whether it's something that worked for you or you didn't really connect with it or whatnot, because I
I
will say this,
yeah.
you've both been a great example of just being beautifully content with yourselves and a smaller group of people, and knowing that like you can have such a fulfilling experience within that, and then also influence and have a greater positive influence on the culture at the same time, you know
Yeah,
worldwide, obviously.
definitely. Like you can do so much just from your town, with your little crew. You can influence the whole rollerblading world. I've always looked at travel as a luxury and not really a necessity. Like it would be something that's fun. but it's not
Sure.
something that we need to do in order to, push things forward or develop.
Yep.
There's so much that we can do just from our home.
Yep.
But I've had great experiences like being I love being around other skaters. I love skating with new people. During that time in Amsterdam, we kind of like the IMYTA was going on, and it
Yep.
wasn't really our jam. We kind of just like fucked around and went street skating while the comp was happening. Like the comp was going down on this big crazy drop rail, and we were off skating a little curb. Um, and we kind of within that we found our crew. Like Ollie Short came and skated with us,
Right.
and we had a great time with him. So I've had no problem connecting with people. Like when I went to Arizona, skating with X and Damian Wilson, and like that was
Yeah.
amazing. That was so much fun. I love being around other skaters. I think our our journey in skating has been unique because we did come from a really shitty little town, and like we have a beautiful skate park now, but back in the
Yeah.
day we did not have any skate park or half pipe or anything like that. Like for the
Yeah.
first 3 or 4 years of our skating experience, it was just like in a parking lot. Like it was extremely simple in terms of the objects that we were skating.
Right.
And I think uh that lives on in our skating, that kind of spirit of like skating shitty
Mm.
spots
Yep.
uh, is still really important to us. And it's important for us, I think, for me personally, to like, because a lot of people don't have access to like beautiful skate parks or, good street spots. There's a lot of
Yeah.
kids skating in towns like Kamloops where they don't have a lot of options like that. And it's important to inspire them, and it's important to set an example. Like, you don't need to have a big city. You don't need to be
Yeah.
from New York or LA. You don't need to have a beautiful skate park. You can have a great experience of skating anywhere.
Yeah. I'm curious whether you had a similar experience, but like as I got older in rollerblading, I always found it interesting. And I know I was victim to this when I was younger, even a teenager, and perhaps it would even be still in my early 20s. But like there was a thing where like to go skating was to actually go to an obstacle. Like I
Right.
had to, if I was to go skating, like it had to involve like, yeah, maybe I would, if it was casual, I'd just go to the skate park, or I'd have to go to a ledge. And there's still people I know who is that same experience. Like they'll only go skating if it then involves like to do tricks. Whereas like some of my most, like fun like experiences just on skates like that I've been doing kind of recently is just like I might be even it actually has been mostly at night, like 10 p.m. for instance. I put my skates on and then I'll just skate out of the door, and I'll probably maybe skate like a round trip. It was like maybe 2 miles somewhere, and it's a very sort of like neighborhoody then sort of densely city kind of like area, like where I'm like skating through, and then I sort of get to an open area and I sort of might skate a curb for a second or just play around in the flat ground doing some stuff, and then once I feel content with that then I'll skate back. But the skating, like over all of the cracks in the streets and the sidewalk, because LA is obviously not perfect environment in that way, and that's part of the charm and the fun. But like I get so much fun just doing that, as opposed to how like when I think of how I used to be, like I can just also sometimes if I can't even do that, I'll go out on the driveway and I'll just skate like that. My driveway has a bit of a curved edges, and I'll just like pump down that and do some fakey little carves, and I'll just pivot around doing 540 swivels, and like I
Yeah.
really just have so much fun just even doing that. And it's this big shift, and I'm so grateful that I've connected with skating in later years with that. And I have so much more fulfillment out of like doing all of those things and being more freer with my body rather than having to exert like, a trick on an obstacle. And that's where I always feel like the most fun I have is when I'm just like out playing, and it could be like with no destination in mind, in mind.
Yeah.
But I know that's not everyone skating. So if you don't mesh with that same thing,
Right.
I can go somewhere where people I'll be perfectly frank right now, is that like it's been like this for a while, but I really, unless I feel inclined to try it at the moment, like it would be like almost felt like a waste of my time if I were to go skate with a bunch of people trying to skate a flat rail.
Yeah.
Like a handicap mellow rail that's quite high or something. Like I feel like at this point when time is so much more limited that it's like I'd rather than just talk to someone who's there. I wouldn't even try to skate because it's
Yeah.
not what I connect with. And I
Right.
feel like, just being, maybe that's the thing of getting older, just being more honest with what you connect with in whatever you do, and be like, oh, it's nothing personal. It's just like, that's just not what I want to do for fun. And for fun is so limited now that just like, I'd rather just like avoid that, you know,
Right. Yeah.
again, it's nothing personal. Yeah.
No, I think a lot of people have that attitude now. Like there's definitely certain objects that I'm just not really interested
Yeah.
in pursuing. I think you're lucky because you did go through those eras in your skating where you were heavily focused on the object, on the ledge or the rail, and now you're at a point where you have those skills kind of sitting in your back pocket and you can play with them, and it doesn't require that kind of linear focus.
Yeah.
You can play more, but when it comes down to it, you have a really nice topsoul that you can do. You have like all these skills in your muscle memory that you can kind of fall back on in a more playful manner, which
Yeah.
is which is great.
It's funny. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm grateful for the times where I looked at skating in a more linear way and I developed like weird skills, where if I always had the attitude that I do now, there's a lot of things I wouldn't be able to do.
Very true. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think building that foundation has probably been very beneficial. And it's like you wouldn't think like, oh, I'm very grateful to have done it, even though I probably didn't have as much choice. That's just what we're doing at the time. But in
Yeah.
hindsight, I feel similarly that way.
Yeah.
I remember I was going to say like dear friend Cruz Sapstein. He once said to me this. I think it was after Winter Clash or something. But he said to me, he's like, Robbie, I want to see you do more grinds. Like, I love seeing you do grinds. Like, you do really good grinds. I think he's more just talking about like just regular sort of basic grinds rather than like, because I think he also said like, oh, I love what you do with like combining this and this, and or whatever. But he's like, I love just like seeing if you did a sweat stance or something. And I thought that was really lovely. But it's that thing where it like comes, I'm sure similarly with you, that like when you do that stuff, like yeah, it sort of takes you back to those moments when perhaps when you're younger. Like I kind of feel like that, and I guess sometimes I do forget that, like, unless you've like known me for a long time and skated with me for a long time and know that I've had a traditional skating background too, that like, yeah, there's a lot of sort of technical grind variations that I actually can do. And I've done, but like, I don't necessarily feel inclined to do them that much. Like, I don't want to just go to a ledge and just practice true sols and true markios and stuff. Like, I used to do that a lot when I was 13 and I loved it. And I still do it on the rare occasion. It's fun, but
Yeah.
like, it's just, I'd rather just like feel the vibe of like a front side on the whole thing or something, and then
Right.
move on to something else. Or it's like I get so less concerned with the specific of the actual grinding thing, position these days.
Right.
Or then I just get more fascinated with like the specific position on no obstacle at all, and it's just using the ground, and maybe it's just merged to that. But yeah, it's funny in that way, because I'm sure like you probably pull out some stuff on the occasion that you haven't done for ages, and it channels like a part of yourself that you've forgotten about or something.
Definitely.
You and Joey, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
do you think there's like well, I was gonna ask like about like the both of you in terms of like, I had this conversation once with Joey, I think, but talking about how like aggressive skating, there was a period in like the early 2000s where I feel like it got really interestingly experimental. People like obviously think about these like glory days, like, and I always think about, like, I feel like there's this era, and I call it like the words era,
Yeah.
that I feel like skating got extremely experimental, and words was just like this like explosive, thing that combined, sure, lots of very like big hammer-esque skating. I mean, how could you not with like Aaron Feinberg? Um, but there was so much explorative stuff obviously happening in that video that then trickled to all this other variations of skating. But I feel like the big skating and the bigger and the exploring of like more stairs, bigger rails, transferring from this rail to that and all that sort of stuff, and bigger gaps took the lead, whereas the explorative experimental stuff didn't, but it stayed around for a while. Like I remember the first time when we saw words and you saw like Dustin Latimer like hand plant through stuff, or like then there was like sliding stairs in that video and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like we immediately went to like the city skate park after like the movie, and we tried to like do that, like slide down some stairs,
Yeah.
and people were like running up grass and kicking trees, and you saw that by all these other random people, but it didn't last. And I'm kind of curious, like, do you feel like that era was a really sort of like inspirational moment for you and your crew, and that like you sort of like kept going through that level of motivation? Because I feel like when I look at it, the way you all skated, and particularly when like Cirque du Soleil like came about, that it was it was almost like a continuation and a furthering of exploration of something that almost had sort of like dwindled off, but you were keeping it alive and then took it in your own direction. Like, was that a pivotal video for you all? Like,
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good description. That Latimer words, both the sections had a
yeah,
huge impact on us. Huge,
yeah,
huge. Yeah, we were, like you said, we were cess sliding stuff, dressing like Latimer, uh,
mm,
wearing big baggy sweatpants and like doing lots of cess slides, hand plants.
yeah,
Um, and then yeah, we never stopped. We like yeah, when that section came out, there was a lot of hate towards obviously that section. There was a lot of negative feedback. And like you said, there were people that started experimenting a little bit, but it kind of fizzled out.
yeah,
Um, but we always were really into that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah. And we would, there were things that came out after that we would gravitate gravitate towards. There was, unique sections
mm,
that we were looking for that, you
yeah,
know. We were looking for that one trick in the video that stood out as being
yeah,
like unique. And you're right that those the big amplitude type skating overshadowed the creative stuff. But for
yeah.
us, we were always like looking for that gem, that
Mm-hmm.
unique, movement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. This is something I thought about like in more recent years, particularly like when you end up watching like some of those videos from the early 2000s, that like there's some very fascinating creative skating going on there,
Oh yeah.
and
A great
almost
Joey
like,
put together a really good compilation like years ago
oh
of
yeah, I still have that on a hard drive. It's a
yeah,
great
it's
one.
so good because
It was
it's
for
exactly what I'm
One
talking
magazine,
about.
wasn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
It was it was like yeah, it was basically an ode to all the mushroom blading that came
mm,
before us, and he took exactly what I'm talking about, those the rare clip in each video that was like super creative, and he put
yeah,
it all in a compilation. It's so good.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's even like, I mean, I feel like that one definitely had a lot of really fascinating ones from the 90s too, which
Yeah.
is like interesting. It's like even that was like, I suppose, experimental in a different way too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There's always
yeah,
been, creative things going on. It's definitely nothing new. There's always been that that style of skating. It's always existed.
yeah, no, absolutely for sure. I
Yeah.
guess just certain things always tend to like go in waves and whatnot. There's always going to be certain people that like um might be exploring it more than others, at
Yeah.
certain given times and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your necklace.
Oh yeah. Which
Yeah.
one? I
Your
guess I
cross.
oh
Your
the
the
cross.
cross.
Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
I'm not religious, no. I I I didn't grow up with like sort of any religious aspect in my family. Um I know my mom is she does believe in God, and I know that she does like she's Italian, and so I know that like my nonna and my nonno, like the Italian side, they were Catholic, so they certainly definitely believe in God and have that religious faith. My dad, no, my dad's always been very much more. I learned from my dad to really don't don't essentially believe what you're told or what you read, like make up, educate yourself and find something that resonates with you or that you identify with, and then form essentially your own opinion on something. And that might also, you could be say like that's like forming your own religion. And I think like religion certainly has a lot of wonderful possibilities and teaches very great things about like existing in life and how to coexist with other people and whatnot. I think kind of just like with anything, it becomes really sad when people use it as a framework for um like segregating and separating one another, or then also like a pushing of ideologies onto people. The thinking, if you don't think my way, then that means that like you're not one of us and you're sort of like our enemy or something, and that, oh, my goal is to convert you or something, like you need to be like us. And I feel like that's the really sad byproduct of religion, because I suppose it's more when it becomes into sort of institutionalized and it becomes more like organized faith. There's nothing wrong with people like believing in something greater than themselves. I think that can be a very wonderful thing. But I do think that um, I do think, at least for myself, um, developing a sense of like confidence in myself and who I am has been like the real sort of sense of belief of strength and what's possibility and what's to like go by in life. I feel like I used to be very much like super conscious of like how I would be able to care for others and what I can do for others. And I feel like that's always been a very wonderful backbone of like perhaps who I am as a person, of being uh considerate of someone else's feelings and needs, or just and whatnot, how you can attend to someone else other than yourself. But I will say, I do think for a long time, like it's also maybe a byproduct of not caring as much for myself. That like the validation of like being a good person came from someone else appreciating and caring for you. And I think as I got older into my 20s and like still having that there, but then addressing more of myself of like, no, like, do I care and think I'm valid and have love for myself without someone else's approval or saying that like, oh no, Robbie is a good person or something. So um it's almost like I feel like people explore these sort of things, they perhaps explore all of these things or get these things through religion. But I probably just got them all from just like self-exploration. Like maybe there's
Yeah.
correlations to text or something in various religions, I don't know, but yeah. That's sort of
Do you
just how I
ever
feel.
Yeah. It's funny because I asked you, if you believe in God and and you talked about religion. Like I think it's unfortunate that like God and religion have become so intertwined, like um because I'm not religious. Like I
Right.
don't subscribe to any religion, but I do think that life is like pretty unbelievable. Like it's pretty amazing that we're here, and it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing that our bodies just work, like our hearts just beat, and our food is digested when we put it in. There's all these things going on in our bodies that we're unaware of, and we're just kind of born into this
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
I do think there's there's some kind of force that like unites us all and is within us and it's outside of us and it's everywhere. And whether you want to call that God or like the force or like I don't
Right.
know. I think the word God is so heavy and it's so people have this idea of what it should be, or like if they don't believe it, I find it interesting like like what do you think God could be? Or do you ever think about like where we or why we're here?
You mean as like as humanity?
Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't like I kind of think in a lot of things that nothing is intrinsic. I don't I don't think that like that's like meant to be or whatnot. Or perhaps really have any strong belief in faith. In fate. I do think the concepts of like hope and having faith is like a wonderful thing to one to have, and those can be attributed to elements of religion. But at least just like I think it's a gift to exist. Um, you know, I'm certainly an open person, like in the sense that like I don't really like to live in a state of absolution of them, like, no, this is 100% what this is. I don't know what happens when you die. More
Yeah.
than likely, from what is described from science, is that you're going to be you're going to assimilate back into the earth. And I think there's something very beautiful and symbolic with that. Is that you're actually you're perhaps your a live being dies, but elements of you become a continual part of the growing and changing existing landscape that is this planet, right? And there's something that I like to believe in that like I think you almost could look at it sort of like layers. It's like the earth in itself like kind of might be considered something like of a god, of mother nature or something, that you're like just existing in this space in it. And then to even go further, like who knows how big and whatnot, obviously the seemingly infinite space which is the universe,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, when you really think about it, it's kind of it's an amazing thing that you just have this, for better or for worse, because obviously everyone's circumstances when you're born into this world, can be better than others. But it's one of those things that it is kind of like, I think it is what you just make of it, your existence. I do think that what we're there's definitely a lot of positive things about you know contemporary life, human civilization in 2022 or not. There's definitely a lot of very bad things, but I think mostly we sort of like know where we are, what industry, industrialization, capitalism, all these things have like done to the world. But then it's where we're existing in it too, so you also know whether you're going to fight against it and perhaps completely be alien to it all, and or you're going to work within its structure and find positive beneficial things that can be like enjoyed through that experience too. I don't know, it's like a kind of a blessing and a curse to sometimes to exist, because we all naturally experience these hardships, and it's like, I didn't there's no choice to want it, but we also equally could be in a forest and be having to worry about whether that bear is gonna like eat me in the night or something, or like
Right.
where am I? Yeah, it's like, so I don't know. I'm always very grateful for what I have, because I know my life could be a lot worse. Um, and I just always think to try and like to maintain the best life I can for myself, and then whilst also trying to be as considerate as I can in coexisting in a space with other people. You know, yeah. How do you
Right.
feel about like? I mean, you're saying that your life is very minimal and that you're just almost mostly like existing in these few spaces, which is like your home with your family, and then obviously your work environment. And like you said earlier that you're very content. Like, do you think that your focus on like what you wanted in life, or what means to be happy, or have some sort of fulfillment, do you think those things have changed, or like to what it is to be human and living?
Well, I'm still figuring it out. Every day is a puzzle. I'm a puzzle, that I'm trying to figure out. Um, and I'm content socially. Like I'm content being, I'm content with my life, but at the same time, I do wonder, like, am I living up to my full potential, or are there things that I should be doing that I'm not doing? Should I be trying harder in certain areas of my life?
Mhm.
Um, like I'm content in some ways, but not in others.
Yeah.
Like I'm very self-critical, and I'm constantly wondering, am I doing enough? Have I accomplished enough? Um, and when I'm depressed, I get down on myself. My negative energy seems to just focus on myself, and I start to just like pick myself apart and not like who I am. Um, so yeah, I would say I'm content with my life, but I'm not content with me.
Mhm.
There's a lot of uh,
Do you think it's the things you like look to explore within this like state that you're not content with within yourself? Is it an internal thing that you're looking to, or more like experiential sort of things of like, I would like to try more of this, which in turn might help me learn about um, a side of myself that I haven't really explored yet? Like how do you look at it in that way?
yeah, it's both. It's exploring different experiences that might help me grow.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but I have like different perspectives on it, because a part of me is very content with who I am.
Yep.
Um, and when I'm in a good mental space, it's not something that I worry about. Like I'm content with who I am. But when I'm in a bad mental state, it's like I start picking it apart.
Do you think does like focusing and thinking about compromise in life like is something that like is a focus for you? Because I think about that a lot personally in terms of like, I know that I think just existing and growing older, there's always this element of compromise, and sometimes you can be comfortable with that compromise. Sometimes that can leave people with a sense of like they didn't try and they feel regretful. um and you never know until you're in those states, of course, but like I know, for instance, for myself, like when I look at my life and my lifestyle, like I'm a single person, 35. I live in Los Angeles, which is like completely hugely removed from all of my family,
Yeah.
from a lot of my core friends who I've grown up with, like all in Australia. I spent most of my years of my life since I was 13 in Melbourne. So, there's a huge amount of people I'm missing in being around. Yeah, so I don't have a partner. I don't have any family, like I mean, yeah, of family members. I don't have like, I guess I don't like when I compare myself into your situation and your life and your lifestyle. There's a lot of things that like you have, for instance, that sound beautiful, and I would love to experience those. You have a wonderful partner, you have two kids, you seem to have a very wonderful sort of like ecosystem of like your home and your space, and then your work. And like my life is like so far like on the polar opposite of that. But I know that there is a compromise because like as much as like I'm open to those things potentially happening, and there's even elements of times where I long for those things in life.
Yeah.
But then there's also the freedom that I know that I have, that my current situation allows me to be like, well, I could pack up and I could go live in New York if I wanted to. I could try this or that, because most of my responsibilities are just really to myself, and they're very minimal. And I don't know if it's been overly strategic. I wouldn't say it's like that. It's almost been a little bit, but mostly circumstantial. That I feel like if I don't use all of that to my advantage, I'm kind of I'm making a disservice to my current situation. It's like, oh well, I should use all these things to my advantage because like I have access to me, and there's
Right.
people like, for instance, someone like yourself who may not have as much of the freedoms in what I have. And that's where compromise. Like, do you feel like kind of similarly, like sometimes that like what you have in your structure of your life that you almost think, well, what would be like if I didn't have this and what I could possibly do? Because you have to have so much more factors in your decision-making process now, right?
Right. Right. And there is definitely a part of me that like always fantasizes about having like a different situation, but
Cool.
ultimately like I'm very lucky and I'm very happy with how things are. And I think it's important to honor whatever your current situation is, and you honor that situation by being grateful and by utilizing it um, to the most and enjoying it to the
Yeah.
most. And there's awesome things about your situation in that you're free and you have a lot more options. And even if sometimes you might be lonely or long for having like a family or things like that,
Yeah.
it's always best to like to approach it with a sense of gratitude and be like, how can I utilize this to its fullest? And
Yep.
you know, yeah, I think it's important to honor your history and honor your story and honor your current situation. Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, like I think everyone, it's natural to dream about, oh, what if things were different? What if I was single, or what if I
Yeah.
didn't have kids, or like, of course, everyone does that, and that's almost a part of figuring out who you are and what you want. Um,
Yeah. And also I think fighting against the perhaps pressures in which like popular culture sort of like present itself to you. I think like social media could be a wonderful thing, but it also can be something that like constantly present yourself with this comparative like mind state of what you don't have. And you're
right,
always usually seeing the framed versions of what other people's lives are, and this like longing of desire of envy and but it's always not like a total example of what the reality is, obviously, too.
exactly,
And that's
exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
everyone, the thing is, like, nobody has a perfect existence.
yeah,
Nobody is free of anxiety or sadness. Everyone deals with those hardships, and like having a certain situation is never gonna shield you from pain or suffering or
yeah,
bad days. Everyone has that regardless of having a family or being single. No
yep,
situation is perfect. I think for me, just trying to figure out the best way to exist in my mind is more important than what my situation is. Like if I can learn to be happy in any situation, I
yep,
think that is the path, as opposed to obsessing over like making your life a perfect thing. It's
yeah,
like you should just try to make your mind, you know, strong and able to withstand,
yep.
hardships and disappointment and all the things that life is going to dish at you no matter what.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. There's
Yeah.
a quote I remember I heard from George Harrison. It's in like this documentary of him actually. But it's like a press conference and someone's asking him about spirituality and faith. And I think he's in New York and like saying something like, like how can you be spiritual in New York City? Right. And he basically says that like, someone can travel all the way to the Himalayas, to find spiritual connection, but essentially they can go all that way and completely miss it. Whereas you can be the heart of New York City and can be the most spiritually content there is, and I
Right.
do think always sort of stayed with me. And I think it taps into what you're saying about like that, like really the internal sort of space is the most important one to feel like you should explore and to develop some element of like to be content with,
Right.
because then it allows you to enter any sort of like environment and space and to feel I guess ready and whole and you know available
Yeah.
to handle whatever life is going to bring you, right?
Right. Because no matter where you go, you bring yourself with you. So there's
Yes.
no escaping yourself. So that's the
No.
journey I'm on, is like trying to make that as good as I can. And I have good days and bad days. Obviously, like sometimes it's great being Todd McInerney, and sometimes it's a nightmare being Todd McInerney. But every day is a challenge. And like, do you deal with any? Do you have bad days being Robbie Pitts?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I certainly don't want to ever like just give an image that like I'm always happy and joyful. I think, it's one of those things that like, let's say when you're at a skate contest or something, like, or an event with other role days around, generally speaking, like, how can I not be excited to be there and happy and to share in other people's spaces? So like I'm usually always like very excited and I love conversing and socializing with people. So that's always going to be that side of me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, as human as anyone else. So like I definitely have like difficult times in my life. And like, I think as we spoke about in the past podcast, like, yeah, I've had moments of like very serious depression in my life. And I would even say even to this day, like I still have waves of that stuff. And I don't know if it's just like, just the type of person that's more susceptible to that. And then I know it probably will be something that will just continually flow out in my life. Perhaps at one point it got way worse, and it needed to be addressed way more. But it's just sort of, I think, a part of like existing, or at least just existing as me, that I know that there's going to be those times, and you just sort of have to learn to, I guess, navigate through them, right? It's like, um, I feel like there's just that thing of like, how do you know what's good if you don't know what's bad? And it's like if you don't have that reference of experience, like you don't know.
Right.
There's also this other interesting thing I saw and heard. I think it was a TED talk, but it was something about how humans are actually fascinated and drawn to this sense of attainment, that we're really always looking to achieve and do this thing. But the real thing is that we're actually like completely lost as soon as we attain what we're going for. And that we're
Right.
actually very driven by the journey of the attainment rather than the actual completing of the task.
It's
You
so
know what I
true.
mean? And as
Yeah.
soon as I like heard that, and I was just like, geez. Which then that's why I always look at like looking at life and things and how I like to exist as being this constant thing, that it's never just like a completion or a static thing. And I just like to hopefully like keep on attaining new things and unlocking new doors and ideas and experiences and versions of like who I am, you know. And there's different things in life that are going to access those for you, like someone might be able to access something new for them because of the way it might be physical, changing their hair, changing their clothes. That exterior transformation can be wonderfully transformative and bring upon a new experience, right? Someone else, it could be like, it could be more of an internal thing or an experiential thing of trying being in a different space that you're not used to, talking to different people. um and I think that's just like the driving thing for me, is to always keep like trying to do that, searching for new experiences and understanding of like what is possible and who to be. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to continue to watch you experiment with
Hey,
yourself. Yeah.
thank you.
Um, I have to pee really bad,
Okay.
so I say we end this. This was awesome, Robbie.
Beautiful. Oh, dude, this is, yeah, I was so stoked, to do this, and even happier at this point,
Yeah, this
like
was really fun.
like the attainment. I'm already thinking about the next one.
Nice. Well, yeah, we'll do this again next year for sure.
Yeah, could be a yearly thing. 2023. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm still hoping to get back up to Canada and come take a trip. So I guess now, as in hindsight, thinking back to March of 2021, the world's kind of come a long way. Also hasn't in other ways, but it at least now we know that like traveling in that way is probably a bit more open. So it's a possibility again.
Yeah, we should do that. I have a
Yeah.
fantasy of having a flatland session with you.
Wow.
That'd be
Yeah, that'd be
fun.
sick.
Yeah.
I would love it.
So let's make that happen.
Yeah, please. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, well, thanks a
Yeah,
lot,
enjoy
buddy.
the rest of your day, dude.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye.